Flight of the Conchords. So this is part of what I've been calling my television addiction series, in which I go through and talk about all the TV shows I watched in 2011 and 2012 when I was living in Cambodia and was watching way too many DVDs. For more information on what this series is and why I'm doing this, I have an introduction video of sorts, which I'll link to in the description down below. But for today, Flight of the Conchords. So, Flight of the Conchords it's a New Zealand comedy duo. They do music and comedy, and the music is kind of comedy-esque, which became famous in the US through an HBO series, which I believe was on TV in 2007 and 2008. Am I remembering that right? I was in Japan when they were getting big in the US, so I completely missed it, except when I was home. One of my old buddies from college was really into it. And in fact, I remember, because when I was living in Japan, through luck of circumstances or geography or whatever, a number of the other expats around me who I used to hang out with were New Zealanders, Kiwis, as they call themselves. So I came back to America after, some time in Japan with all this knowledge about New Zealand culture and history and geography, and actually it's all surface level stuff, but more than the average American would know. And my friend was asking me questions about it because he was getting really into Flight of the Conchords. And he said, "Is it true that they really hate Australians?" And I said, well, they get annoyed when you confuse them with Australians. They do identify some Australian habits as being annoying, but they don't really hate them. But that was one of the things that was a running joke in the TV series Flight of the Conchords, because they're from New Zealand and they really hate Australians. I think Flight of the Conchord, I can't think of another example of New Zealand culture which was so famous, which became as popular in America. And I don't know. Let me know in the comments if I'm overlooking something. I mean, I know there are, bands from New Zealand or actors from New Zealand or famous people from New Zealand. But Flight of the Conchords was a TV series which put these guys as New Zealanders front and center. So a lot of the jokes were about them being from New Zealand, or their accents, or, jokes about them not fitting into America because they're from New Zealand, or jokes about them hating Australians because they're from New Zealand. I can't think of anything mainstream that was that focused on New Zealand culture in America. I don't know. What am I missing? I say mainstream, but it was on HBO. It wasn't on the normal television networks. My friend, I don't believe he has HBO, or I don't think he had it at the time. I think, did he get his copies out of the library, maybe? I don't know. But it was on HBO, but it seeped into the wider culture. It was available somehow. The other thing, I was thinking right before I filmed this video, I was thinking, I haven't heard anyone mention Flight of the Conchords in years. Is this, and this quite often happens when I go back and review something from years ago, which is what I've been doing on this channel with these series. Quite often something will be quite famous back in the there will be a lot of buzz about it 10 years ago, and then you'll think to yourself, well, yeah, nobody's been talking about that for ages. And Flight of the Conchords, I mean, I'll always take my opinion with a grain of salt, because I'm out of it and I've been living abroad and I'm not hooked into what people are talking about in coffee shops back in America. But it feels like I haven't heard anyone talk about this show in ages. I feel like it's kind of been forgotten. But it was really popular for a while. Really popular. It seemed to be popular with a few of the guys I went to college with for a while. other than that, it's really difficult for me to say because I wasn't living in the U.S. at the time. Anyways, when I was in Cambodia, in the DVD stores, I stumbled across the DVDs for this show and decided to give it a watch and see what my friend really liked, and bought season 1 and 2 and watched them and really enjoyed them. It's funny. The two guys, they're comedy musicians. It reminds me a bit of the Smothers Brothers, although I should be careful in making that comparison because the Smothers Brothers were before my time. I never really watched a full episode of their TV show, but I'm sort of familiar with their shtick through cultural osmosis, which is two folk singers, and one of them would play like the dumb one, and the other one would play like the smart one. In Flight of the Conchords, to a certain extent, they're both doing the dumb thing. But one of them is like emotionally stunted, and one of them just has no worldly knowledge of the way things work in the world. Actually, that's true to both of them to a certain extent. And they're getting, I think, trying to figure out how things work in America. And they've got a band manager named Murray, who's works at the New Zealand Embassy and also manages their band in their spare time. And Murray is also completely clueless about how the music industry works. Murray, I think, might be my favorite character from that show. The scenes when they're having the band meeting and Murray is talking to them, or when they're in the car with Murray, those tend to be some of my favorite scenes. I was rewatching some of that on YouTube right before filming this video. Yeah, and if you haven't, if you want a good laugh, or if you find this stuff amusing, search on YouTube, Flight of the Conchords, Murray. You can find some of his greatest moments uploaded there. Each episode will have a few different songs. And again, this goes back to the original shtick these guys had, where they would write kind of comical songs. So, it's one of these things where it's a folk song where it sounds like super serious if you were just listening to the music and the harmonies. But then if you actually listen to what they say, it's just ridiculous. Like, what was the example of one I was listening to recently? I think you might be one of the most beautiful girls in the room. If you were on a street, you'd be definitely the 4th or 5th most beautiful girl on that street, depending on the street. And these are all these are the lyrics to the song, which, when sung in a melodic and serious way, kind of make it sound like it's a serious song unless you actually listen to what they're saying. And it's that kind of shtick throughout. And I believe they came to the show with a lot of these songs already in their repertoire from their years of touring or singing these songs on stage. And then they subsequently built the episodes around these songs. So they would have an excuse to put 2 or 3 songs in every episode. Now, I'm going to anger the fans of this show, or the fans of this comedy duo, but I thought the songs were the most boring part of the show. I really like the back and forth. I like the comedy parts. Really like the parts with Murray, the band manager, as I said before. But I felt like whenever they got to a song, the momentum would just stop, and you'd have to listen to the song, which was funny, but also maybe just went on for a bit too long. That's just my opinion. My friend, the friend from college who I mentioned earlier, really loved the songs. And in fact, I think maybe he had even gotten into this band through the songs before the TV show, because they had been on a BBC radio show prior to that, which I think it's Some Airplay in America or something. And he really liked music, and he was into a lot of these quirky music groups. So if you're into that stuff, then the songs are the draw, and for a lot of people it was. Maybe I'm just showing myself as a Philistine by saying that I felt like the songs slowed it down, or I would often feel like I had to put up with the songs in each episode. They only did 2 seasons, by the way, not because they had low ratings. I think the show was doing very well, getting a lot of good ratings and good critical reception. But my understanding is they ran out of songs. And again, this is based somewhat on what I was just reading on Wikipedia, but they had, because they've been on stage for years, built up this repertoire of songs, and then blew through those in the first season. And so then had to take some time off to write some new songs for the second season. And then at the end of the second season, they said, no, we're done. we can't keep pace with writing so many songs for this show. It's I believe they call it like the second album syndrome. So like the idea is that a group will be on stage for years, they'll finally get a record contract, they produce an amazing first album, and then they'll have nothing for the second album because they've used up all their songs for their first album. They did get 2 seasons, so I guess it's not really a second album syndrome, it's maybe a third album syndrome. But after 2 seasons, the duo said, we're done, and they would just went on to other things. So, if you haven't already checked this show out, it's worth checking out. I suspect actually most people have already seen it by now. But if you haven't seen it, check it out. And let me know in the comments, do people still talk about this show? Or is this something that people have completely forgotten now? You know, something that was really popular for a couple of years and then people just forgot about. It is my impression. Let me know.